Hi everyone, I'm PirateWalnut and here's how to carry as Mercy in Stadium. Mercy is one of the best supports to play in Stadium as she can help make your team into hyper carries in the early game while also becoming a nuisance herself, and not just because you play her. So let's talk about her role in Stadium and how to build for her. But first, let's get down some Stadium basics. Stadium is a game mode that revolves around cash, where in between rounds you can obtain items and powers to alter and power up your hero. You get cash by healing teammates, dealing damage, killing enemies, and assisting in kills. When you get a lot of kills and assists without dying, you create a bounty on yourself, and if you die, you give the enemy bonus cash for killing you. There is also a mechanic where when you are behind on cash, your team gets a percentage cash boost for the round to help you catch up. The quicker you can get cash, the more items you can buy, which will make you much more powerful than the enemy. While Stadium is still Overwatch at its core, creating a cash lead is what will win you most games as the power items give can be game defining. Now let's circle back to Mercy. Why is any of this important? Mercy is a character that frankly farms assist and healing by just existing, which can lead to your team gaining a lot of cash, making your team more powerful as the game progresses. And with Stadium's Mercy rule, it can also lead to very quick games if you can steamroll. Especially with the powers she can equip, you can help take away some of her biggest weaknesses. Now let's start with how you should build her. Let's talk about early game. Early game is one of the most important parts of Mercy in Stadium, and can really dictate your impact on the game. So let's start our build strong. There are 3 powers you could choose for round 1, being Threads of Fate, Renaissance, and Crepuscular Circle. Threads of Fate can be very consistent as it is easy to proc since all you need to do is beam another teammate before you beam your main target, giving you insane value in the early game. The main downside of this perk is building this perk does mess up your build path for your mid and late game, since you'll have to wait till round 5 to get both Crepuscular Circle and Renaissance, as these 2 perks are a must pick for most Mercy builds. And with Threads of Fate falling off heavily into the late game, I tend to avoid Threads of Fate because if I lose the early game, then my late game will be much worse. Renaissance can provide a lot of impact as all you need to do is complete a res and then gain an insane burst of value with Valk, but its downside is how inconsistent it can be because it can be hard to res safely depending on how your team plays and what the enemy is running. And if you can't res, then you are down a perk. Which leaves Crepuscular Circle, which is my main pick for round 1. Crepuscular Circle can give you consistent value that is easy to proc, especially since all you have to do is pop ult near your team and shoot the enemy. This power may not give you as much value as something like Threads of Fate early on, but it does open you up to your power spike on round 3 and leaves you with 2 power slots for late game, which will make your build much more flexible in the long run. Renaissance first can still be great, especially if you are able to get reses off, since you can give value earlier than someone who is building Crepuscular Circle. But my general guideline on how to pick between Renaissance and Crepuscular Circle is looking at if the enemy has dive characters, and if they do, then I'll always choose Crepuscular Circle. Otherwise, I'll consider what map we are playing and choose accordingly. For example, I'm more inclined to take Renaissance on maps like Place Rokoi and Arena Victoria, since there is a lot more cover that can make reses safer compared to maps like Honoka and Throne of Anubis, where early game reses may be a bit more difficult due to map geometry. If you don't want to think about that, then just pick Crepuscular Circle first. For items, I pick up Weapon Grease for faster healing, Armored Vest for armored health, and Compensator for stronger healing. The reason why we opt for Armored Vest instead of First Aid Kit is the damage reduction that armor gives is much more useful than shields, especially since you'll be regenning constantly from your passive. Generally, you want to get as many assists as you can to maximize your cash while keeping your team alive in order to prevent the enemy from getting money. I would highly advise not going too aggro since you don't have the items to do so safely, but if the opportunity comes, then take it. Also be mindful of when you res. Bad reses are especially bad since if the enemy kills the person you res, then you give the enemy even more cash, which can put you in a bigger disadvantage. Before the next round, always make sure to peek at what the enemy is building. You don't need to necessarily know every build, but a quick look to see what stat they are building into can help you use your cash better. Usually I try to build against the enemies with the biggest carry potential, such as the DPS or a rich tank. Going into the second round, I tend to rush Chain Evoker. Chain Evoker makes your damage boost better and synergizes especially well with Crepuscular Circle, since it'll help you charge your ult faster when damage boosting. Because this item gives armor, I'm willing to sell Armored Vest to buy this item. If I can't buy Chain Evoker, I look to buy Vitality and Crusader Hydraulics, or Icy Coolant and Advanced Nanobiotics. Vitality and Crusader Hydraulics are a core of a tanky Mercy and are so good early game, especially since you can stack a good amount of damage reduction early game for relatively cheap at only 800 and 500 cash for both items. I would like to mention buying the shield version of these two perks that can be a cheaper alternative and are a good into ability heavy teams such as Torpedo Juno, but for the most part, choose the armor perks. Icy Coolant and Advanced Nanobiotics are great if you don't need the survivability and want to push your individual power more. This is best done especially if your tank is taking a lot of pressure and you need the extra healing power to keep them up. Going Weapon does cost more, but it'll help you charge your Val quicker, which can help get Crepuscular Circle online quicker. At the minimum, your build may look like this, but if you have extra cash, then take either the green items mentioned in round 1 to use the rest of your money. Honestly, as long as you buy any of the items mentioned, you should be okay, but whatever you do, just don't buy AP, as none of Mercy's kit outside of the powers Wambulance and First Responder benefit from this stat, so stick to the weapon and survival tab if you don't plan on taking these powers on round 5. This round you play the same as the first one, just make sure to take a peek at what the enemy is building in order to adapt your playstyle, such as playing farther away from Cass if he has the auto aim perk, or keeping tabs of when Soldier uses his Helix rocket if he has the aimbot power. At round 3 we get our next power. At this point you should have Crepuscular Circle and Renaissance, so when choosing a power, choose whatever you are missing. This is Mercy's true power spike, as the Valks you'll be constantly casting will be very annoying for the enemy team to deal with, especially with the amount of healing and damage boost you provide to your team. At this stage you should try to get Caduceus EX, since the added beam length will synergize well with your ult, and then use extra cash to get more healing power or survivability. I would prioritize raw stats until you can comfortably buy more epics. To maximize the amount of stats you have, try to build rares and commons first, as it'll be relatively the same price as one epic item, but give you more effects and give you the same amount or even more stats as epic items. Just note that doing this does take up more item slots, and at some point you will buy epic items in order to save item slots, but for now focus on making yourself as strong as possible. For healing power, I prioritize Icy Coolant plus Compensator, since it'll give me as much weapon power as Talon Modification Module, but with the added cooldown reduction. But an alternative is Advanced Nanobiotics, Compensator, or Weapon Grease if you are tight on cash. For survivability, I prioritize Vitality to give you as much armor as possible, but if you can't get that, then take Reinforced Titanium or other common survival items. At the minimum, you should have Caduceus EX, Chain Evoker, and any filler items as needed. Once you have these two powers, you are able to spec into anything, so make sure to plan ahead during round 3 and 4. If you are struggling to get reses off, then build for Tank Mercy. I recommend taking First Responder on round 5, as the tank items plus extra 250 overheld on res will help proc Renaissance much more. If you go this route, then purchase Ogundamu Reduction Field, then look to purchase Nebula Conduit when possible, as these items synergize very well, as the damage spread out counts as instances of damage, which will quickly stack Ogundamu. If your team needs more support, then take Class Extra Full or Protective Beam for more sustain on round 5, and spec into more weapon items such as Hard Light Accelerator, Amari Antidote, or Nebula Conduit. If your team needs to do more damage and want to push damage boost more, then choose Distortion. Distortion does stack well with your ult, since you'll be healing, damage boosting, and now giving lifesteal. If you do choose Distortion, then build weapon items as you would if you build for more support. Each game will be different, and you should not necessarily only commit to one build. While some builds spec into certain perks, as long as you have Renaissance and Crepuscular Circle, then you'll be okay even if you have to swap item builds. One item I do recommend if you don't need the weapon or tank stats is Resurrection Rangefinder. I usually build this item only if I'm going against teams where reses will be more unsafe, or against CC like Lucio, but I usually don't build it since you do lose out on a lot of stats you could get from other items. By round 5, you should have at minimum 3 epic items, and by round 6, you should have at minimum 4 epic items. So for example, if I'm building tank, then I should have Chain Evoker, Caduceus EX, Ogundamu Reduction Field, and Nebula Conduit, and you should be looking to cap your build into round 7. Your item choices are either to help you cap out your build with epic items listed in the previous section, or to counter the enemy. Some items to consider that deviate from the usual Mercy build include Geneticist Vial, Cushion Padding, and Anti-Leisure Wear. If you do spec into some of Mercy's AP focus powers, this does open you up to other items that do have pretty good effects, such as Mark of the Kitsune and Lumerico Fusion Drives, but since most of the time you won't be building AP, I omitted them, but if you are interested in an AP Mercy, then leave a comment down below and I can create a build. Round 7 is endgame, and by now you should be pretty much full build. Unless you took any AP powers, your playstyle shouldn't have changed. Most of the time, games end at round 4 through 6, so don't expect to make it this far since your goal is to end the game earlier with how quickly you can scale. If for some reason you are full build early, try not to steal any bounties and try to get teammates that are low on cash to get the kill. Once you are full build, you don't need cash since there are no more items to buy, so focus on helping your team get stronger leading up to round 7. Your maxed out build should be Chain Evoker, Caduceus EX, Ogundamu Reduction Field, Nebula Conduit, Hardlight Accelerator, and Amari's Antidote, with Amari's Antidote being your flexible item slot where you could replace it for any of the niche Mercy items I mentioned before. This is expensive and don't expect to hit this every game, but this mainly shows the build I usually play the most and the most consistent way to build Mercy. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded, but I'm slowly getting back as real life stuff is finishing up. Let me know what you like to build on Mercy in Stadium and leave a comment down below. I also would like to give a shout out to Stadia Tech, made by me and Sabine, as it has been a great tool in creating and sharing builds. Sabine is also the reason why I have these icons as well. Thank you again, and until next time, bye bye!